If you ever feel useless, just remember that the African Union exists. Many people believe that the African Union was built to unite the African continent, to protect our sovereignty, and to defend our future. But today, in the heart of West Africa, one of the few leaders calling for true independence is being isolated. Not by France and not by the US, but by the African Union itself. There are countless videos out there about the West's sinister move to get rid of Captain Ibrahim Traoré. But in today's video, I want to talk about how the African Union is failing Captain Ibrahim Traoré and how history is repeating itself, just like it did in 1987 with Thomas Sankara. My name is Wayne. Welcome to my channel Plan Back to Africa, where I share my journey of leaving behind Germany to travel the African continent full-time and my journey and experience of settling here in Nairobi, Kenya. I am also a cultural anthropologist and historian in African studies, which is why I love to share my insights and my knowledge about the socio-political realities on the ground. Now, without any delay, let's dive straight in. As I said, the African Union is failing Captain Ibrahim Traoré, not because it condemned his rise, but because it refuses to acknowledge why he came to power and what his leadership represents to millions of Africans who feel betrayed by the old order. Jihadists were taking over the entire region. The people were angry and corruption was everywhere. And Burkina's former government had strong ties to France, but no answers. And so Traoré stepped in, young, unbored, and unapologetically African. And what was the reaction of the African Union? They immediately suspended the country, following the script it applied to Guinea and Mali. And sadly, that's the African Union's automatic reaction to coups: condemnation and suspension, regardless of the context. The African Union sided with the collapsing elite, not with the frustrated youth or communities facing jihadist attacks, poor governance, and dependency. Sadly, this isn't new, fam. Every time a leader challenges the colonial order, the African Union acts like a referee for the West. When Captain Ibrahim Traoré expelled French troops, reclaimed resources, and began talking about a federation with Mali and Niger, the African Union didn't ask, why are people rising with him? Instead, they asked, when is the next election? But fam, let's be real for a moment. Elections without sovereignty are theater, and democracy without security is an illusion. The AU talks unity but punishes independence. It calls for peace but is silent when foreign interests undermine our nations from within. Let's rewind to 1987. The great Thomas Sankara stood in front of the Organization of African Unity, what would later become the African Union, in Addis Ababa and said, "The debt cannot be repaid because first, if we do not pay, our creditors will not die. That's for sure. But if we do pay, we will die." For those who don't know, he was talking about the debts that the newly independent African states inherited from their former colonial masters. Many people out there are not aware that the debt that the African nations are paying to the IMF today were never theirs. These were loans that the former colonial masters took from banks in the Western world to develop the infrastructure in their colonies. And now the newly independent states and their African leaders are forced to pay back these loans. Imagine, Africans were never compensated for the hundreds of years of slavery, exploitation, the resources that were stolen, but instead they were forced to pay the debts that they never took themselves. So in 1987, Thomas Sankara called on all African leaders during his famous speech in the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa to collectively refuse to pay this colonial debt, the same debt that keeps Africa poor and dependent. He said,
s'analyse d'abord de par ses origines. Les origines de la dette remontent aux origines du colonialisme. Ceux qui nous ont prêté de l'argent, ce sont ceux-là qui nous ont colonisés. Ce sont les mêmes qui géraient nos États et nos économies. Ce sont les colonisateurs qui endettaient l'Afrique auprès des bailleurs de fonds, leurs frères et cousins. Nous étions étrangers à cette dette. Nous ne pouvons donc pas la payer. La dette, c'est encore le néocolonialisme où les colonisateurs se sont transformés en assistants techniques. En fait, nous devrions dire qu'ils se sont transformés en assassins techniques. Présenter des montages financiers alléchants, des dossiers. Nous nous sommes endettés pour 50 ans, 60 ans, même plus. C'est-à-dire que l'on nous a amenés à compromettre nos peuples pendant 50 ans et plus. Mais la dette, c'est sa forme actuelle. Contrôlée, dominée par l'impérialisme. Une reconquête savamment organisée pour que l'Afrique, sa croissance, son développement obéissent à des paliers, à des normes qui nous sont totalement étrangères, faisant en sorte que chacun de nous devienne l'esclave financier, c'est-à-dire l'esclave tout court, de ceux qui ont eu l'opportunité, la ruse, la fourberie de placer les fonds chez nous avec l'obligation de rembourser. Parce que nous n'avons pas de quoi payer. Nous ne pouvons pas rembourser la dette parce que nous ne sommes pas responsables de la dette. Nous ne pouvons pas payer la dette parce qu'au contraire les autres nous doivent ce que les plus grandes richesses ne pourront jamais payer, c'est-à-dire la dette de sang. C'est notre sang qui a été versé. Je voudrais que notre conférence adopte la nécessité de dire clairement que nous ne pouvons pas payer la dette. Non pas dans un esprit belliqueux, belliciste. Ceci pour éviter que nous n'allions individuellement nous faire assassiner. Si le Burkina Faso tout seul refuse de payer la dette, je ne serai pas là à la prochaine conférence.
A few months later, Sankara was dead, assassinated in a French-backed plot with regional complicity. The African Union, they never investigated. They never defended him. They never even spoke his name. And now, decades later, we watch them do the same thing again. Today, Captain Ibrahim Traoré is picking up where Thomas Sankara left off. He is trying to reclaim national sovereignty over resources, security, and political decision-making. But the African Union, heavily donor-funded, many people don't even know that over 60% of the African Union's budget comes from outside Africa, including the European Union, France, and the US. And that already should tell you enough, by the way. So the African Union, instead of helping Burkina Faso build new institutions or support its demand for regional autonomy, isolates it, essentially punishing the country for breaking from French influence. Honestly, this is so embarrassing. The African Union talks Pan-Africanism, but acts like a gatekeeper for foreign interests. Imagine insisting on fast-track elections and the return to civilian rule when the previous civilian government was the source of the crisis. And Traoré rightfully argues for sovereign transitions, allowing the people to define their new system, free from foreign interference. But the African Union refuses to engage with this alternative political imagination and left Traoré and millions of Burkinabe on their own. The result? An alienated Burkina Faso that seeks new allies in Russia, in Turkey, and others. Captain Ibrahim Traoré symbolizes a revolution against neo-colonial structures, both military and economic. But the African Union, sadly, is too compromised and too externally controlled to stand beside leaders who challenge that order. Instead of punishing Traoré, the African Union should ask, what kind of systems produce coups with popular support? And what would it take to build a union that serves African people and not Western politics? Fam, this is a call that all of us must stand with Captain Ibrahim Traoré, not because he's perfect. What Burkina Faso is doing is not perfect, but it is real. Their struggle is our struggle too. Captain Ibrahim Traoré is not a savior. He is a mirror, reflecting our unspoken truth, that we can never be free if we keep policing the people who are fighting to be. Thomas Sankara warned us, you cannot carry our fundamental change without a certain amount of madness. Maybe Traoré's boldness is madness, but maybe, just maybe, it's exactly the kind of madness we need right now. That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Let me know what you think in the comments. Each one teach one. And I look forward to see you in the next video. Bye.